Welcome to Whispervault, where we unearth tales from the shadows and bring them into the light. Today I'm going to tell you a story about how I, an IT professional, became the very fake exorcist I called brother. Jake. This is a journey from the mundane glow of a computer screen to the chilling darkness of the unknown. A journey I barely survived. Life used to be predictable. I was your average techie, staring at lines of code in a comfortable IT company. The hum of servers was my lullaby, the glow of monitors, my constant companion. But then inflation hit, harder than a bug in a new release. The economy, once a stable network, crashed. My comfortable life unraveled, and soon, I was among the countless others who lost their jobs. The severance barely covered a month's rent, and my savings dwindled faster than a free trial on a popular app. The polite rejections from job applications piled up, each one a colder gust of wind against my already bare hopes. Desperation, as they say, really drives you, and it brought me to this dingy no-name bar that became my new normal. The sign out front was just a faded old thing from the 90s, and honestly, none of our regulars even noticed. Drink here could have been our name, and honestly, who really cares, right? Most of my clientele were either drowning in debt, navigating their third divorce, or just waiting for the end. Sometimes, it was all three. I worked there because, most of the time, it paid in actual cash, not promises or drink tokens. Rent was always looming, and my bank account was practically empty. I had tried every wild money-making idea from TikTok and Reddit. Tutoring wasn't my forte, streaming lacked my charm, and dropshipping died before I even grasped its concept. The days blurred into a monotonous cycle of wiping down sticky counters and listening to the mournful tales of strangers. Each clink of a glass felt like the ticking of a clock, counting down to my next financial crisis. One night, while I polished a chipped glass for what felt like the sixth time, I seriously considered calling in sick the next day. My eyes wandered to the TV above the bar. It was just boring sports reruns or weather updates. That night, a televangelist took over the screen, strutting around a fake church set, waving a crucifix like a traffic cop. He screamed about demons, his voice a chilling mix of sobs and cries, leaving the audience in tears. It felt like a cheesy act, all fake faith and drama. What really stood out to me was the price. Cleansing services start at $2,499. I blinked. The screen shifted to a woman in tears, hugging him and whispering, "Our walls don't scream anymore." The price just popped up again. Right there, bold and in your face. I stood there, glass in hand, dumbfounded, wondering how this guy was making 3 months of my rent just by yelling at drywall. The sheer audacity, the brazen exploitation. And then, it hit me. A spark of an idea, illicit and audacious, ignited in the desolate landscape of my desperation. I set down the glass, wiped my hands on my jeans, and made a decision that, at the time, felt utterly brilliant. My mind raced, conjuring images of myself, perhaps in a borrowed suit, waving a cheap cross. The thought was both ludicrous and intoxicating. Back in my tiny apartment, hunched over my laptop, I typed, "How to do an exorcism real good." The initial results were a flood of religious dogma and official church rules, all basically saying, "You need to be ordained, and also, don't do this." So, I plunged into the darker, stranger corners of the internet. Blogs with names like Sacred Warrior Cleansing Services. And there it was. The real gold. Guys in robes, charging $500 an hour to wave herbs. I can make that happen. I've got some herbs in my kitchen just, some old parsley flakes and garlic powder. But it's a start. Their methods were so simple, it was honestly inspiring. No fancy rituals or long studies, just a bit of flair and people in need. My shopping list was simple. A parody of genuine religious items. 1 Bible, cheap any version. Salt, table salt, works fine. Crucifix plastic, spray painted, gold. Candles dollar store, pack of 10, and Latin phrases copied from sketchy demonology forums. I even found a website that detailed the energies associated with different herbs, though my holy arsenal consisted of what I could scavenge from the back of my spice rack. That night I practiced in front of the mirror, waving my makeshift crucifix and muttering, Exausto TSP, Spiritus Imendis, barely suppressing my laughter. I looked ridiculous, a comedian in a tragic play, but I knew it wouldn't matter. If someone was desperate enough to call me, odds were they didn't have a priest on speed dial. They wanted a solution, and I was ready to provide the illusion of one. I created a Craigslist listing under the name Brother Jake, because it sounded biblical and fake enough that no one would question it. My advertised read, no spirit too dark, no presence too strong. Guaranteed results, a bold promise for a man armed with expired herbs, and a spray-painted cross. I figured it would take a few days for anyone to bite. It took 6 hours. The call came around noon. I almost ignored it, thinking it was my landlord again. But something, probably rent anxiety, urged me to pick up. The voice on the other end was soft, nervous, and breathy. Her name was Mia. She'd been hearing banging at night and whispers in the hallway. She thought maybe someone had died in the house and never left. She lived alone. That's what makes her story feel even creepier. According to horror rules, folks who live alone are way more likely to get haunted. Spooky. I scribbled down her address and assured her brother Jake would arrive within the hour. I borrowed my neighbor's beat-up Civic, which reeked of ashtray and beef jerky, and rehearsed lines the entire way. Begone, foul spirit, I'd whisper, then shout. I cast you back into the abyss. My heart pounded, a mix of fear and exhilarating anticipation. Mia's house was small and aged. The shutters were cracked. Paint peeled like dead skin. She answered the door in a floral bathrobe, pink rollers in her hair, and heavy slippers. Her eyes darted behind me, as if expecting someone to follow her into the shadows of her fear. I'm so glad you came, she whispered, like this was a top-secret operation. Inside, the air felt wrong, heavy, like a room holding its breath for too long. A subtle chill snaked up my spine, a shiver that had nothing to do with the lack of heating. She trailed close as I unpacked my props. The crucifix, candles and salt. She watched my every move, as if I were performing a sacred ritual. Her gaze, unwavering. I walked through the house, muttering Latin phrases I couldn't pronounce, infusing them with as much fake gravitas as possible. She didn't question them, so I kept going. Spiritus Sanctum, Dominus Repelmulum, I chanted, sprinkling salt in corners, lazily waving the Bible at the ceiling fan, and shouting into closets. My voice echoed in the eerie silence, a theatrical performance for an audience of one. Then came the kitchen, the hot zone. Mia said the banging was loudest there. I opened cabinets, tapped on walls, and then I heard it. Scratching. Behind the fridge, my blood ran cold. I expected nothing. Maybe pipes. But something was definitely there. A genuine tremor ran through me. I braced myself. It was a rat. Huge, smug. It blinked at me as if it knew I was a fraud. Its tiny eyes holding a mocking intelligence. There it is, I declared, my voice a booming stage whisper. The dark has taken form, Mia gasped. You'll need to leave. I must confront it alone. She clutched her robe. You saw it. Yes. It's evil. Very evil. I maintained my solemn expression, though internally, I was celebrating my quick thinking. She nodded solemnly, whispered prayers, and backed away. I wrangled the rat, tossed it out the window, and did a few jumping jacks for dramatic effect, ensuring she heard the struggle. When I stepped outside, Mia nearly wept with joy. I told her the presence would dissipate in a few hours. She handed me $200 cash, wrapped in a Kleenex, like a mob bribe. From then on, the jobs rolled in. One guy had me exorcise his bathroom, where I waved smoke around the toilet while he sobbed, convinced of a malevolent presence in his plumbing. Another thought his mirror was cursed because his reflection blinked wrong, a subtle tremor in the glass that he attributed to something unholy. I upgraded my gear. A wooden crucifix, a second-hand priest coat, and I even memorized better Latin. The money flowed, and the rent anxieties began to recede, replaced by a growing confidence in my new, unusual profession as a fake exorcist. Most gigs were harmless, simple theatrical performances for desperate souls. But then came the call. It was around 6 p.m., and I was microwaving noodles when my phone rang. A man said he got my number from a friend. He offered double my usual rate. He gave an address on the town's edge. He said the house had energy, and that there had been an incident. His voice was flat, devoid of the usual panic I'd grown accustomed to, which in itself was unsettling. When I got there, the house was something out of a horror B-roll. Leaning fence, boarded windows, and the dust so thick it felt alive. The air grew heavy. The closer I got, a suffocating silence that pressed in on me. The man, however, looked surprisingly normal. Clean shirt, tidy hair. He stood by the dilapidated porch, a stark contrast to the decay around him. He handed me $100 up front, his hand brushing mine, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a chilling coldness. Inside was worse, a stench I couldn't place. Old meat, mold, and death. It clung to everything, a sickening sweet odor that promised decay. Furniture was covered in sheets, looking like ghosts, while dust floated in the sunlight, creating a spooky vibe. I lit candles, their flames flickering weakly against the oppressive darkness. I chanted phrases, my voice sounding strangely small in the cavernous silence. The man hovered near the door, silent, never spoke. Just watched. His stillness was unnerving, his eyes following my every movement with an intensity that felt less like observation and more like a predator's gaze. The door slammed, but a sharp, concussive force that rattled the very foundation of the house. I spun. Another door. Then a plate flew off the counter and shattered against the far wall, shards scattering like icy shrapnel. This wasn't a rat. This wasn't pipes. This was something else entirely. I turned to the man, my voice barely a whisper. You seeing this? He nodded, terrified, his face pale in the flickering candlelight. Strong one. Strong presence, I lied, my voice betraying a tremor I couldn't hide. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drum against the approaching horror. I grabbed the front door, desperate to get out, but it wouldn't open. It was stuck, jammed, as if an unseen force held it fast. You lock this? I asked. He shook his head, eyes wide and slack-jawed, staring off into the distance. His terror was palpable, a chilling wave that washed over me. I turned. She was there, a figure in the hallway, not walking, hovering. She moved with an ethereal grace, a silent glide through the thick, dusty air. Her eyes were black holes, not just dark, but devoid of light, dripping thick black sludge that never touched her chin. It oozed, perpetually falling, yet defying gravity. Her mouth twisted into something inhuman, a rictus of silent agony or malevolent joy. Her dress was soaked in places, dry in others, as if she had just emerged from a murky, forgotten pool. She shimmered like heat off pavement, her form wavering. An unholy mirage. The stench of death in the house intensified. A cold, cloying presence that seeped into my very bones. That's her, the man said. I panicked. My carefully constructed facade crumbled. I threw salt. Nothing. It seemed to pass right through her. An impotent gesture against true darkness. I threw the jar, a desperate, useless act. It, too, passed right through. My props, my carefully crafted illusion, were meaningless here. The guy shook like a leaf, totally losing it. She didn't even look at me, her dark, dripping eyes were glued to him. She moved like smoke, then collided. The impact was silent, yet viscerally violent. He collapsed, convulsed. His arms smacked the floor and legs bent wrong, snapping into unnatural angles. He began to levitate, slowly, agonizingly, his body twisting in midair as if caught in an invisible vice. A low, guttural sound, not quite human, emanated from him. I stood, frozen. My mind raced, but found nothing. I had no script for this. No plan. No Latin phrase. No amount of spray-painted gold could combat this. My little exorcisms were nothing next to this entity's real power. The door still open. A sliver of hope. A desperate escape route. I ran. I didn't look back. The sounds of the man's agony, the chilling presence of the hovering figure, fueled my flight. I just drove, shaking, breathing like I'd outrun a bear, the adrenaline coursing through me like poison. I called the non-emergency line, my voice strained, claiming to be a neighbor. The cops said the guy was good, just meditating in a clean, quiet house. I didn't believe it. My hands still trembled on the steering wheel. The phantom stench of that house clinging to my clothes. Next morning, driven by a morbid curiosity, or perhaps a desperate need for confirmation, I passed the house. He was in the window, smiling. Eyes never blinked. Head moved like a mounted owl. A cold, unsettling smile that promised unending nightmares. I got home, burned the props, watching them turn to ash, hoping to erase the memory. Brother Jake was officially retired. Maybe I wasn't cut out for holy work after all. Some shadows are better left alone. If this story sent shivers down your spine and sparked your curiosity, don't just scroll and subscribe to Whispervault. There's a whole vault of darkness waiting to be unlocked.